Hello, friends and neighbors. This is DJ's Album Share, and I'm your host, DJ Roller. This week, I'm joined by one of my favorite singer-songwriters in the Richmond music scene, Mackenzie Roark. You can stream her solo work on all streaming platforms and Bandcamp. You can also find her group work with Pistol Sister on all platforms and Bandcamp as well. I encourage everyone to go and check that music out. I personally love all of her music, so definitely check that out. The albums we're going to be talking about this week are Lenard Cohen, Songs of Lenard Cohen, and Ramblin Jack Elliott, Young Brigham. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please make sure you rate and review, and you can review multiple times and rate as many times as you like. If you're listening on Spotify, please follow along so you know when we post new episodes. And lastly, if you're following along, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you are liking and subscribing to the channel. I appreciate all the support, guys, and enjoy the episode. This podcast is brought to you by Carolina Sea Salts. Specializing in smoked sea salts, their products can be found at Etsy. Just search Carolina Sea Salts, look for the smoked sea salts, and tell them DJ sent you. Thanks, guys. Hey, Mackenzie, what's up?
Hey, DJ, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And before we start, you picked a really good artist. Not even a really good artist, but his debut album and probably some of his most, I would say, celebrated songs or celebrated work, I would say, you know?
Yeah.
So it was really hard for me to pick a contemporary of his time, because really what I wanted to do with the show was more do stuff, time period stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's really, we have a unique ability to go back and listen to stuff on demand now that my father's generation didn't have.
Right.
And a lot of this stuff, the idea for the show and everything spawned out of conversations I've had with him about music over the years.
Oh, cool.
Some of the stuff has been about, hey, you don't know what it's like to save money up and buy an album.
Yeah.
And the album art is what you bought it for, and then take it home and it sucks. Like,
Yeah.
he was like, and back in those days, like $20 was like, you know, a thing.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. So I really, going into listening to your album, I knew that I was going to have a hard time, right?
Yeah.
And it really was a lot harder than I thought to figure out somebody to go with Lenard Cohen, because he's just so poetic in nature.
Yeah.
He was a novelist and a poet beforehand.
Yeah.
Before he released this album.
Yeah,
so.
and he's kind of his own weird category. Like, there are definitely a lot of other artists that, you know, you can draw similarities to, but it's not like he was really big into like a certain scene at that time, or like he had a lot of people who were doing the things that he was doing. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love him so much, is because he is so distinct and so different. And so, yeah, I mean, I could see that being kind of hard, choosing someone that's similar.
Well, that's the whole point of the show, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see the conversations I've had throughout my musical career, which is not very much, but I've been playing music my whole life, and I've always run across other musicians and always like, have you heard this? Everybody has their little nerdy thing about an artist that they like, and then I actually appreciate it more when I hear why you like that. Like, I then can go back and listen to it another time and go, you know what? She was right, or he was right, or whoever was right. Mm-hmm. That is pretty cool about that, and it is part of the reason why I wanted to do this right now, because I want to expand my knowledge of songwriters and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself a songwriter. I write from here and there, but I don't consider myself a songwriter like some people I know.
Right.
But I do appreciate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So jumping right in, it's the Songs of Lenard Cohen. The album was released in 1967, and it was his debut album. Mm-hmm. And one really cool thing that I was reading a lot today, and the reason I drew the comparisons between the two, is the New York folk scene. So supposedly, and all this stuff, I'm going to say allegedly or whatever, because I'm reading like a website and they're quoting people that I don't know. So whatever. But allegedly, it was his idea. He was in, I think, Toronto or something. Montreal, that's right. And he wanted to go to Nashville, and he stopped in New York folk scene, kind of just called him. Yeah. Which is wild to think that. Someone as because in the 60s, and country music in the 60s in Nashville was not, I don't think was as, he would have been really
out of place. Yeah. Like, there's not like a country bone in Lenard Cohen's body, I would argue, you know, and that's fine. But yeah, that is interesting, like him wanting to go to Nashville. I feel like he fits so much better with New York and just the idea of New York, and especially New York in the 60s. Right. And, you know, his music is just so like wintry almost, in my opinion. And like, I always like to listen to him on like dreary days and cold weather. And you know, for some reason I think of that more as like being in New York, like being like kind of lost in a big city, wandering around.
Right.
It's overcast, whatever. You like listen to Lenard Cohen.
He's got very Townes Van Zandt vibes to some of the stuff he does where you're like, damn, dude. I had a previous episode, I did a Townes album.
Yeah.
And the gentleman I had on, Sean, he was like, yeah, he calls it the Townes curve, where you're like, the song's doing okay, and all of a sudden it's just sad.
Yeah. Well, that's the best thing about Townes is like, you never know where it's going to end up.
So, I really don't treat this as an interview, but I do have a question. Like, how did you find the album? What was the way that you came about the album? Because I always find that to be super interesting.
So I kind of, my musical journey began in like late high school, early college. I mean, obviously I've loved music forever, but really getting into songwriters and stuff was a big part of, I guess, just like my creative development as a teenager. And so I was really into Bob Dylan, like went through my whole really long Bob Dylan phase, and then was kind of like wanting to find something similar, but like something new. And so I actually was in Ireland the spring of my freshman year of college. I like went there just on a trip, and I was in a bar, a pub, because you could legally drink there, of course, when you're like 18. And I remember So Long Marianne came on overhead, and I recognized it. Like I knew I had heard it somewhere. Like I don't know who would have played it on the radio or where I would have heard it, but you know, I heard it somewhere, and it just like really captured me. I don't know. It was just there was just something about it, and I just really liked just kind of the way his voice sounded like as he sang it, and I like couldn't get out of my head. And so I remember going back to school that spring and like just having it on repeat and like just So Long Marianne all the time, and like
that's actually my favorite song off the album.
I mean, it's amazing. Like all the like I love the whole album, but I mean, So Long Marianne is such a standout, especially
nice.
and knowing the story behind it too. So anyways, that was my first song that kind of introduced me to Lenard Cohen. And so then I went and like really dove into his discography and
tons of work.
Oh, there's so much. And my favorite albums are probably his first 3 albums plus New Skin for the Old Ceremony. Oh shit, I forget what it's called. Anyways, that one. So yeah, I don't know. So I it was hard for me to choose just one album of Lenard Cohen.
That's why I make y'all do it. I don't.
Yeah, it was so hard. I knew I wanted to do him because I am very passionate about him. You had already done someone with Townes, and you'd already done someone with Bob Dylan. So I was like, okay, I can't talk about them. My third guy is Lenard Cohen. So that's why I just chose the first one.
Awesome. I mean, for me, that's kind of we all share the same. I feel like everybody who attempts to write songs or whatever, or at least that I've occurred, we all kind of have the same thing, right? Now, whether your songwriters you get into are Dylan, Cohen, and all this other stuff, you still get into a certain select songwriters group, and then you kind of go through a phase with them, and then you move to the next person that's adjacent, and then you go the whole thing. I'm like that with John Prine. I'm a huge I'm just obsessed with all of his writing. Yeah. So to me, like that's my entry level to everything, because mine was more like Prine, Dylan, and then on down the line to Cohen, right?
Right.
And so it's always super interesting because I hate it's cliche, but it's like we're always talking about the same kind of group of guys.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just in what order did you go through them?
Right, right, exactly.
And
what journey did you take?
So fascinating.
Yeah,
it's so fascinating because I didn't get into Townes and Lenard Cohen until later. They were my later songwriters I got into, and their stuff is so much more poetic, and I'm much more on the musical side and stuff, so I have to sit down when I'm listening to a poetic songwriter like this and really read lyrics along with him, because that's the only way I can really comprehend, because I'm much more thinking about the tone, the music stuff.
Yeah, the instrumentation. And with Lenard, like, there's, not to say that he doesn't, because some of his songs are really instrumentally interesting, especially on kind of later stuff. I would say probably on this album, So Long Marianne probably is kind of one of the more interesting, like, musical.
He's got some cool finger picking stuff on there too. He's got some interesting musicianship on it.
Totally.
It was just for me to have contextual reference to what he was saying. I have to read along.
Yeah, you got to look at it, or else you'll miss it.
Yeah, like, that's exactly.
There's so much packed in there.
There's one line in particular that I love from So Long Marianne is I'm standing on a ledge, and your fine spider web is fastening my ankle to a stone.
Yeah,
and it's like that's just the my brain goes in so many different directions with
right
that, you know, and I think that's what kind of those really poetic writers, that's the level of greatness.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about.
And it's like one of those things too where like, you know, you can listen to a songwriter like this or an album like this and for years and still discover like new lines and new things. And, you know, and yeah, to have the lyrics in front of you and actually like read through is smart, like especially if you're really trying to like dig in and like have a really, you know, good grasp of what
one of my previous guests said this show is like doing homework for albums down. I'm like, it is, and I love it. Like,
this is like the kind of homework I wish I had.
I'm such a nerd for music. Like every time I've ever like got on a level with someone musically, like where we played together and we were like, oh, that's so cool. Who did you listen to? And it was this conversation I've had not in front of a microphone, organically. I've done it thousands of times.
Of course,
I'm trying to distill this down into like one little droplet of it, so I need to be a little bit more precise about what I know instead of being at a bar drunk being like, I think that this guy said this to this guy. You know?
Yeah.
Because there's tons of that too. And I probably say shit I don't know what I'm talking about a lot of the time either. But
it's good, me too.
One of the things I looked at, I do take the album art into account. Have you seen the reverse side, not the side with
the burning lady?
Yeah,
I
thought that was really cool.
It was like my screensaver on my computer for years.
And I looked up, I was like, oh shit, like, because obviously, like I was saying, like the album art, it's got to be some thought process to it, right? He doesn't just slap the shit on there and go, oh yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah. And so his quote was, it's the triumph of spirit over matter. The spirit being the woman breaking the chains in the fire of the prison, breaking out of that. And so it's like, he's so deep, man.
Yeah.
Golly, it's just everything on there. Those are the type of people that I want to be sponges around. Where I just want to like, okay. And I know that this has fallen into a whole thing because the next topic I'm going to jump on right before I talk about the songs. But I just want to talk about really quickly. He was so everything meant something. Every line means something. So it's so deep. I can't even I feel like I'm not even doing it justice by talking about it. Yeah. Because there's so much stuff I know I've missed. I've got to go back and re-listen.
And you know, I think part of the appeal of Lenard Cohen, for me at least, is like his person. Like it's like he has his work of his art and his music and his poetry, but like him as a person, he's also just incredibly introspective and deep. And like when you read his quotes, they're like, I have a ton of books that he's written and interviews and whatever. Like he's just a fascinating human to me. And so, you know, quotes like that is just like, that's just Lenard being Lenard. Like he just said, like, that's the way he talks, or I mean, talked, I guess past tense now, but it's just, I would like give, you know, a part of my body if I could have a conversation with him, like and soak it in and just like see what he has to say.
Those types of people are obviously very rare, but I do appreciate them. But one of the things I said to you when you sent me the album was you get extra points because of the mandolin player, right? So then that took me down another rabbit hole, which is just like I had to find out who's playing mandolin because I'm such a nerd about this stuff, right? His name is David Lindley, and then the rabbit hole it took me down, again, this is all alleged, but supposedly Cohen had heard his band Kaleidoscope play at a folk bar in New York and like went and got that guy. That was specifically, he handpicked that guy to come play mandolin on his album, on this specific album, which is just like a cool little fact, which is, you know, that part of the folklore of the how an album's put together and who they decide to gets put on it. I love that, man.
I love that too.
It gives me a little dopamine rush. Yeah. Like, that's so cool.
And it's like, there's like such a romantic aspect of it too when you think about it in, say, like the 60s or 70s. Like now, I mean, of course, everyone networks now, whatever. But now I feel like it's just so like the internet. Like I've found them on Instagram. I found them on whatever. And like back, you know, in like 1960s Greenwich Village or whatever, it's like, like, met them at the open mic or the coffee house or whatever.
Too with today's music, and I say this as a mandolin player, is that like you get, as a mandolin player, you get pushed into this box of like you have to play this specific style and this specific type of music, whereas like back in those days there were a lot of different, even before that there were tons of different mandolin players that were playing tons of different styles of music. It's just the ones that we'd like to talk about and that are well known specifically play bluegrass and folk music. But there's tons of blues and jazz mandolin players out there that play like other styles of music. Or even with this guy, the Kaleidoscope band, that's the rabbit hole I went down to. I gotta go listen to that band now, which is like where I'm at, right? But it's like they are classified as psychedelic folk. So it's like, all right, so that's another realm where like back then it was much more open. And if you found this guy who played a certain style of music and you wanted him to play, it was because of that freedom to be themselves. And that's something that I think today I appreciate the historian side of it, right? I appreciate us keeping, because the bluegrass stuff is how I grew up and playing. You got to keep it alive. I love that, right? But I'd hate they don't like change. People who like traditionalism don't like change. And it's like, come on, man, I can't be authentic and be traditional. This is some part I've got to break. And I choose to be more authentic than to be more traditional. Yeah. So I find that with these mandolin players that are off the beaten path that you find in a weird Lenard Cohen album, those are the ones that I want to listen to. Right. Those are the ones where I'm like, all right, these guys were, and I think this guy's still alive, which is pretty cool. So I'm definitely going to check all that out. But it's just another level to it, because all the difficulties I think I have with it. Can you imagine being a mandolin player in the 60s playing, trying to do the same type of thing? Right. So it's kind of a kindred spirit type of thing. But talking about some of the actual songs in the album, the 3 that I picked off, because sometimes I'll go through like with a concept album and I'll do every song. Sometimes certain songs just jump off to me. Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we talked about So Long Marianne. I think that from what I was reading, most of this album had bigger success in the UK and overseas as opposed to here. But I think So Long Marianne was his bigger hit in the US. And actually, Suzanne was covered by like a bunch of different people. Yeah, well, so Judy Collins originally covered it and played it on some show. And that's what kind of made... That kind of like broke him out and brought him into the, collective consciousness of pop culture or whatever. Because before that, Probably just gave him the ability to play.
For sure. And like it's actually interesting. Like he, is a poet and all this stuff in, Montreal, Canada, and, didn't want to be a performer. Like he just wanted to write. And so kind of gave this song to Judy Collins, and she did it and took it and ran with it. And then there was some circumstance where he was going to have to perform it, and he was like terrified and did not want to, because he's like, I don't want to perform. Like, I just want to write the shit. I can only imagine like
writing a song for someone else and like them like agreeing to sing it, and then you'd be like, okay, now you sing. You're like, wait, no,
I don't want to do that. But I think it was Judy Collins. I could be saying this wrong, but I think it was her that was like, no, you need to like just do it. Like, it's your song. Like, you need to do it justice. And so he did. And
there's something to that time period as well of like, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with copyright laws and like how we treat copyright stuff now, but there was like a much more freedom of like information thing.
Yeah,
like if you wrote a song,
exchanging songs,
because there was no YouTube to go and learn how to play so and so song. The only way to learn how to play Mackenzie's song was Mackenzie had to teach it to me.
Right.
What I mean? So that was back then. It was a little bit different, or you had to know somebody that knew that person.
Yeah.
And so I've known older musicians who talk about that era in such a dreamy way, and I'm always just like, man, I wish we could bring back maybe not all of it, just like 10% of that. Like just a little bit of it.
It would be fun.
It would be so much fun,
and just this community of people just sharing their songs. And I mean, I was thinking about it a lot last night when I was listening to the Ramblin Jack Elliott album, and I was like, everyone's just like sharing each other's songs. Like, I mean, and
that's part of what the connection, because I try to have a connection between the two artists, right? And one connection obviously being the New York folk scene, right? Because both of them were very prevalent. Ramblin Jack Elliott, being one of the like more country folk dudes you ever meet, is from Brooklyn, New York.
Right.
So it's like his dad was a Jewish like doctor or something like that. So
I read him being described as an urban cowboy, which I kind of loved.
Yeah, I loved it. But it's like for him to come in, and you have two sides of folk musician, and one I'm more on the Ramblin' Jack Elliott side because I'm more the performer. You write me a song and let me perform it.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something with him that he is such a prolific. He's done so many things, so many different things. He's been on so many different wavelengths, from being like a student of Woody Guthrie to basically teaching Arlo Guthrie how to do things because Woody died early. Yeah. There's this whole tie-in with that scene as well, where it's just like, man, he was, he may not have been the poetic songwriter that all his peers were, but he was just as good as a performer.
Yeah, he was, I think, like, more of his thing and his shtick, I guess, is like his personality. And like, I think that can really go a long ways. I think Townes Van Zandt is kind of similar. Of course, obviously he's an amazing writer as well, but I think that like his personality and his persona and his stage presence or whatever, and like his ability to tell stories on stage and all of that, like I tell my
bandmate all the time, you just got to WWE it up. You got to turn into your wrestling self.
Yeah,
like what you would be as a wrestler.
Hour.
Yeah. And that, like, especially if you're talking about like, it's one thing if you're playing at a brewery, playing at a bar where that bar pays you $100 or $200 to play at. It's another thing if people have paid money to come see you.
Yeah, and like, sit and listen to you. Yeah,
right. That's a whole nother level to what we're talking about. Like, and one really cool thing before I transition, I just love the whole New York folk scene, the connection with Cohen, and I think that I don't think that we can really, you know, in 2021 we can really understand how they were killers. There's a bunch of killers in that scene.
Oh my god,
you got like
I know
everyone's
together, and I'm just like, god damn it, like I wish I could. Just
part of me kind of understands that, because the only times I've progressed as a musician is when I'm around other killers.
Right.
You know, it takes for me to get better on the mandolin, I need an exceptional rhythm player. Yeah. And so with Riley Zoller's the guy I've been playing music with. You know, his rhythm playing and his stuff is what has pushed me to become what I am now. So I think that that's part of it too. Yeah. So you got to have people that are good in the scene who also don't have their ego so tied to everything that they won't go out and like make a community out of it.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, it forces you to like up level your game and be like, all right, like I'm playing after Joni Mitchell, like I have to be good. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna get up there and play a bunch of crap.
That was the one thing that was my biggest connection between the two, is the scene, and then just how many killers, and then like Dylan comes on to it a little bit later, but still like you've just got like a murderer's row of like top tier talent.
Right.
And I think that that's why like they were all so good. You know, like you said, like when you've got to follow, I do mandolin competitions, and there's nothing like having the guy in front of you do really well.
Yeah,
yeah. Like, shit, he just crushed it. Now I got to walk out here right behind him and do 3 minutes of like a song that's pretty much the same song he just did.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many fiddle tunes, you know. So it's like, it's insane. But to transitioning over, the album from Ramblin Jack Elliott is Young Brigham. Was released in 1968, so a year later, and it was his first major label release with the record company he was with. I can't remember, but you know, I wanted to read something really quickly because of the connection I had to dig for. Right?
Yeah.
So this is all stuff I've got off of various websites that I read about him. But he ran away from home at 15 to join a rodeo, which was one of the things that I loved about his story. Right? Yeah. He really lived. You know, it's one thing to want to be that persona, it's another thing to like go out of your way to live that persona.
Yeah, to go be a cowboy.
And I think that he really, you know, lived that. He really tried to be that life. But when he was on with the rodeo show, he was with him for 3 months. He came across, and I don't know how accurate this is, but he came across a guy named Brigham Rogers, and that guy like played banjo and sang and played guitar and like just did poetry and stuff. Yeah. And so that would have been his first, like 15, 16 years old. That would have been his first like musical influence.
Right.
And I think that turns into part of his persona as well, right? Because if you're with the rodeo, it's entertainment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the connection there of him like seeing this guy, he's like, oh shit, that's what I want to do. Yeah. It kind of like he has to double down on that that time, you know?
Well, there's like the whole showmanship aspect of it, you know what I mean? Yeah. And if you're like around like a bunch of impressive showman, you know, it's like you're gonna kind of learn a thing or two.
I feel very much I relate to that aspect of it because like with folk music and bluegrass and stuff, at least the way I came up with, you were either super technical or you were a showman. Like the what is it, the hee-haw stuff, the Ronnie Stoneman. I've been at festivals where she was at, where we would me and my little group of friends would play, and we would do a little stupid shit like the two banjo players, one would stand in front of the other and like one would reach around and like play you know, do stuff like that. And she came up to us one time and she was like, you might not be the best musicians, but you guys know how to sell a show.
Yeah, as long as you have like an entertaining experience for the audience.
And so I'm much more on that side. I've worked on my technicality a lot since then, but it's just funny to think about that, like the showman side of it is very important.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of the reason Lenard Cohen and Ramblin Jack Elliott reference too is they're like two sides of a coin and folk musician to me.
Yeah.
So you need to have the poetic side and you need to have the I can cover anybody's song. Even on this album, he does this thing where he does the caliper.
I know, yeah. I was like, what is this? I thought that was so funny too because like I was looking at the track listings and that was the first Ramblin Jack Elliott song. The first three are covers, and then the first original is just him making noise.
Wow, whatever it is.
Yeah, it was just, it reminded me of Townes Van Zandt again, to bring it back to him, because I'm like, it feels to me like he's like in on some joke about himself or something.
It's a John Hartford thing too. So I don't know if you're familiar with John Hartford.
A little bit, yeah.
So I did his album previously with the Townes episode.
Okay.
And on that episode, on that album that I did, it's Earth, Words, and Music. It has Gentle on My Mind on it, which is like one of my favorite songs, right?
Yeah,
but he has a song on there called something Washing Machine. And he makes like the washing machine noises with his mouth.
Okay.
And so like those vocally like weird things that these artists do have always been like they're my type, because all right, I grew up with a kid who was a drummer, Austin Robbins. Shout out to Austin. Austin Robbins, and me and him grew up. We were both musicians, and I looked at him one day and I was like, I figured you out, dude. When I was a kid and I was riding in the backseat of my dad's car and I'd go, my dad would be like, shut up. He'd think the car's fucking up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Austin's dad was like more of a hippie, you know, and he just let him do, and the kid would beatbox, the kid would do everything.
Yeah.
But those types of things we all inertly kind of do when we're kids.
Yeah.
It's just kind of an upbringing of whether you kind of keep the creativity going.
Right.
And when you draw it out, like, yeah, he's just going, for a whole like minute.
Yeah.
But he has the freedom to do that on a record.
Yeah.
That right there keeps it. To me, you never know what you know. You never know what might take off. Now, yeah, I could have told him that wouldn't have been a good thing to do, but at the same time, like, you never know. So keeping the door open almost. He never closes the door to creativity. And I love that. I've always loved that, dude.
Yeah.
John Hartford is probably my favorite reference to something like that is a little more melodic. It makes a little bit more sense. But he does a song on the album that I love, that I absolutely love, and it's the first track on the album, If I Was a Carpenter.
Yeah.
I've always loved that song.
I love that song too.
And one of the things that he does so well, I think, is just he knows where to sing his song, the covers that he's singing.
Yeah.
You know, he's obviously not, I don't think he's singing them in the key that they were written, but he's singing them where he just picks a good place.
Yeah.
You know, he picks all of his vocal stuff with his guitar stuff. It's just very lonesome sounding. You're very like, oh, I feel the emotion that you're trying to convey. And, you know, he has like alternate lyrics as well. So it's like it's fun. It's a lot of fun, you know.
Yeah. And he's got a really good like dynamic voice. Like the first couple songs, it was almost like it sounds almost like different musician. Like he just has.
He's like a chameleon or something.
Yeah, exactly. He just has like this kind of dynamic thing about his voice, and it really it kind of captures you.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like you said, the first three songs, Talking Fisherman, Tennessee Stud, they're all covers.
Yeah.
The one thing about like songs like Tennessee Stud, and I've heard like Doc Watson cover, I've heard like Johnny Cash cover, I've heard like everybody cover.
Yeah.
You don't get the rawness. Like he's very raw on that track.
Yeah.
Like everything else is just super polished almost.
Right,
you know?
right. Almost like mechanical or something.
Yeah,
like just...
Doc Watson would be probably the closest thing to what he does that I'd say is like super raw. But on that level where like you can listen to Chet Atkins play Tennessee Stud and it's like, all right, this is a fine-tuned, well-oiled
like you hit
machine.
all the notes. It's great. It's amazing. But there's no soul.
There's something about not being perfect that I love.
Yeah.
I got maybe it's I had Eric Horks from South Hill Banks on, and he was talking about you know, we were talking about 2 live albums, and you know, when you hear something live and somebody's a little off, it's like, oh, you're still human.
Yeah, no, it's great.
At the end of the day, I love it. It's because we get lulled in, especially in the digital age right now, we get lulled into thinking there's just perfection coming out with everything.
Yeah.
And I love these like older albums where you can listen to it and you go, well, he's not perfect, but it still gets the job done, and it's still really cool tracks, you know. Going back to some of the stuff I found, he taught himself guitar and eventually became Woody Guthrie's student, which is something I thought was awesome. But Woody Guthrie died early in Arlo's life, and Arlo is quoted as saying that, according to Arlo, Woody Guthrie was quoted as saying that Elliott sounds more like me than I do. And that's crazy to think that like he was so into the New York folk scene at the time that he was just like, there's something, and I really relate to this. Like maybe. He wrote another song on the album too. I think it was that 912 Greens.
Yeah, the Greens one.
The talking song.
Yeah, it was like a spit long story. Yeah, I liked that one.
He does write songs, but you can tell he's much more of a performer, right? Yeah. But there's something to surround yourself still with some of the greatest songwriters of all time. Yeah. And then even do some of their songs to the point where they're like, oh shit, you're doing that better than I am.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was really funny. Like, I was reading like a Rolling Stone interview with Ramblin Jack, and basically his relationship with Bob Dylan, because of course Bob Dylan was like a big like Woody Guthrie, enthusiast or whatever, and came to visit him in the hospital and yada yada. And when Ramblin Jack and Bob Dylan met, Bob Dylan's like, oh man, like I love you, like I have all your albums, like, and you could totally hear it in Bob Dylan's like first album. Sounds total like that, and Ramblin Jack like sound really similar. And then Ramblin Jack goes on to like cover a bunch of Dylan songs, which I think is like cool as shit. Yeah, I think it's cool as shit. Like,
might I say, "Don't Think Twice Is All Right." That might be one of the better versions of that song out there.
That's a really good version.
It's a really, really good version. There was some article I was reading that like when he did Dylan covers, he would introduce them and saying, "My son Bob Dylan wrote this." And so there's a big riff there as well. But
that's funny.
I think that's part of the inside joke thing that you were talking about.
Yeah,
they all didn't treat it the same way. That I think the worst thing that can happen to somebody is you make money off of something, because then somebody else then looks at that and they go, oh, I want to do that too, right?
Right.
And so the people who really and truly love it, like to me, Bob Dylan loves songwriting. Like he loves it, whether the success is there or not.
Yeah.
And the proof in that is that his tour where he went electric and he was like, fuck them, I'm not giving them money back. They pay for my tickets.
Yeah.
So that proves to me that he just likes doing what he does, and he doesn't care about the appreciation. And there's tons of artists throughout time that do that, right? But I feel as though there's more and more and more and more of the opposite who just do it for the whatever.
Yeah.
And it's sad because you lose those guys like this who just do it, and then they, he makes this stupid little joke. Yeah, Bob Dylan's my son or whatever. Like, it's just all of it in the end of time to me is like these guys really wanted to do this. They didn't give a shit if you played my song. Yeah, play my song. I have friends. I have a couple of people who I play with, and I'm lucky enough that they are much better songwriters than me. They tell me all the time, "Yeah, man, play my song," and I'm like, "Dude, sure, I'll play it." But I just don't. I love that type of songwriter as opposed to one who wants to be whatever.
Oh yeah,
whatever,
we get very precious about it, you know, and like.
And I get it, I get it. I completely get it. Like if you were to sit here and want me to give you mandolin lessons, it's like, all right, well, what the fuck, like it's a different. I understand you work very hard to get to that level to be able to do that.
Yeah,
but. I want more. I want that 10%. I want much more camaraderie. I want that. I want it, and I don't know if it's just the lack of like open mics or what has made me feel this way.
Yeah.
But I'm really just like, I need people. I need my fellow musicians right now. I need people to jam with. And like, my band's also kind of. You're hearing it here first. My band's breaking up because Riley is moving back to the West Coast. Oh. So I'm a free agent now. So there's another aspect to that too. I love him to death. I wish him nothing but success, and we're totally fine. I'm on his side about it, but it's just life. Life happens. Yeah. But at the same time, now I'm sitting here going, "Oh shit,
what am I gonna do?" Yeah,
I really want to play music with everybody.
Yeah.
And so I've come to this impasse where it's like I'm not upset by any means, but I just want to play music. I want to go out there and hit I want to do it with these guys. I'm so jealous of this type of scene.
I know.
I'm so jealous.
And everyone's just friends with each other and hanging out with each other. I mean,
I long for that.
Yeah.
And when especially when I go so deep into these like deep dives of these albums, and you hear these stories about like, him teaching Arlo Guthrie how to play guitar and how to play Woody Guthrie songs and stuff. And you're just like, man, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's really heavy. Like, it's one thing to be Arlo Guthrie and have to deal with your father being Woody Guthrie, but then you got this guy over here that's like, oh yeah, well, I'll teach you how to play his songs and stuff because I was his best friend.
Right.
It's just real heavy shit, so like it's part of me that the camaraderie aspect of it, I really just long for.
Yeah.
And I have tons of friends I just don't get to see as far as music.
Yeah, it's
everywhere.
weird these days. There's there's just like nothing happening. There's no open mics. There's like, I feel like a lot of venues or like different places have kind of just shut down, and it just
and
like
also
sucks.
too, as an artist, how do you have a good conscience and good faith inviting people to come out in large groups to
right, exactly,
congregate to see you play music, right?
Yeah.
So I do understand that as well. But I hope that we can figure out some way, and I've said this since last March. I like whoever figures out how to be innovative right now is going to be the one who really is successful.
Right.
And we're going to figure out who likes to do this shit and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like every touring artist in the country is going to hit the road at the exact same time.
Yep.
So those of us who are lower level, I'm very low level, but like. I'm gonna be very sparse playing gigs in the next year and two.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to just kind of build my own thing.
Yeah.
This being one of the things.
And that's awesome. I mean, I was talking with Trey Hall from Dharma. He's he had said
I've never met him personally, but I know who he is.
He's an awesome guy. He's a good friend, and he'd probably love to do this. But yeah, he was saying how like Richmond music scene, he's like, it's gonna reemerge as just like a totally different world.
I think it may be good.
I think it will be good too. Like I don't see that really as a bad thing. Like
because it's going to come back to what I just said. Those of us who love it are going to be the ones who continue to do it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we can all find common ground and understand that we all love it because we just did it through the end of times, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. And like form like a stronger community. And
I think
like,
so. Yeah. I would love to help do that too. That's part of the reason why my sole goal has been to have on like local musicians and help promote their music. And one of the reasons I want to have you on. I love your show. I'll stream your stuff all the time.
Yeah,
so.
thank you.
That's I'm kind of I get to nerd out and be like, yeah, look your shit too.
Well, thank you.
But I think that is another factor as well, right? You don't think that Jack Elliott would cover a Bob Dylan song if he didn't like Bob Dylan songs?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
there's nothing wrong with us sharing stuff,
Yeah, no, totally.
I don't mind paying somebody if I get famous playing your song.
Yeah.
No, this is just a joke. But we're getting pretty close to time.
Yeah.
What were some of the songs that jumped out of the album on the Ramblin Jack album?
So
anything in particular?
I mean, obviously, like I liked the obviously, like Fire Carpenter and Don't Think Twice, I'm very familiar with. So, like, I really liked his renditions of those. The one Random Stone song that he covered was fun.
Oh, thank you.
That was
so awesome.
I was like really curious because I was at the end and I'm listening. I'm like, what is this going to be?
So
like,
my friend Andrew Pauly, we covered that together. He's like the only person I've ever heard cover that like acoustically.
Yeah.
And then I've listened to this album before, but I never thought about maybe I never got to that track or maybe I skipped. I don't know what. I never connected the dots.
Yeah.
I listened to it today and I was like, I sent him a text message. I was like, dude, this is it. This is what we do.
I've never heard the Stones version. I meant to go listen to it.
It's very like 60s rock too, which is cool.
When
like
he was covering it, I'm like, this sounds like a Stone song, like an early Stone song.
That's another thing of him doubling down on his persona where he goes, fuck it, I'll cover a Stone song that probably was released around the same time.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it was probably like maybe a year before. Like
one of my favorite, to deviate, one of my favorite stories, rock and roll stories of all time. I'm a huge Allman Brothers fan, right?
Okay.
The Allman Brothers were recording. Dwayne Allman was in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, before the Allman Brothers recorded down there, just by himself.
Yeah.
And he ended up playing with Wilson Pickett on Wilson Pickett's album, right? And there's one song on there. Wilson had to finish the album. He goes, man, what song should I record? And Dwayne's like, record Hey Jude. And he's like, the Beatles just released that. He's like, fuck it, man, record the song. And they did it. And to me, there's like a guitar break at the end of that song where he's just like wailing. Yeah, and it's like some of the first times you've heard like that style of music played like that, right? And I love that. I love the idea that no song is untouchable.
Yeah.
That nothing, like if it's out there, we can play it.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties into his persona, and the story just has always been one of my favorite rock and roll stories.
Yeah, that's funny. I've never heard that one.
Yeah, he was. That's one of the. I think it's on the documentary Fame Records or something like that.
Okay.
But one more thing, to tie into the Jack, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
I'm a big movie buff, and so the Netflix documentary Rolling Thunder Review.
I was actually just going to ask you if you've seen it.
Jack's on that.
I know.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
When it first came out, and me and Andrew Pauly, like I keep referencing, he's a huge Dylan fan. So
Yeah.
me and him, we started playing One More Cup of Coffee.
Yeah,
we started
yeah,
playing like a couple of different ones after that came out because my I get infatuated. I get this honeymoon stage with every song.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, I want to play.
You want to listen to it like 24/7.
Yeah. And then
totally.
2 weeks later, I'm on to another one, you know?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It intends to happen. But yeah, his appearance on there, like you can go watch him now in the heyday of the time period that we're talking about, doing exactly what we're talking about him doing.
Yeah.
That's a really cool, and you know, I feel so very, very fortunate to be alive during this time period, to be able to look both of these albums up on demand.
Yeah.
Stream them and enjoy them and go back and listen to them 100 times and not have to do it on vinyl. That's super nice.
Yeah.
But now I have to go buy a Lenard Cohen vinyl of that album because of that album art. Like, the album is different, but I want the album art now.
I got it framed in my house.
Oh, really? You had the album framed?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sick, dude. That's so awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm nerding out over here. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it so much.
This was fun.
We'll do this again soon, very soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.